You have seen the fire. You have seen the wall of the dead. You have seen where the greatest conqueror in history slept on a mattress the size of a single man, with a boy's bow pressed against the wall beside him. Now, turn around. Look at the corner you almost missed. It is flat against the western wall, below the weapons rack, rolled and bound with a cord of braided horsehair. From a distance, it looks like a spare piece of bedding, extra felt, perhaps, or a folded prayer cloth. You would walk past it without a second thought. And that, you begin to understand, is entirely deliberate. Unroll it. What opens across the floor of this room is not a map in any sense you have been trained to recognize. There is no ink, no parchment, no cartographic grid, no compass rose, no carefully lettered place names in Chinese or Persian or Arabic. What is here instead is felt, dense, worked Mongolian felt. And pressed into its surface is a physical record of the known world as understood by a civilization that learned geography by riding through it. Mountain ranges are raised ridges of cord, stitched tight and hard. Rivers are strips of darker felt laid in the actual curves of their courses as reported by scouts who followed them on horseback for weeks. Cities are marked with small stones, each one a different color, gray for fortified, dark for destroyed, pale for unconquered, the inventory of an empire written in mineral rather than ink. The edges of the map are unfinished, not damaged, not torn, unfinished. The western margin trails off into loose felt threads where new territory is still being reported, still being pressed into the surface by returning generals who carry the shape of the world back in their hands and their memory. There are stones near the western edge that have no color yet, places that have been located but not yet classified, not yet decided. He is not recording what he has taken. He is planning what comes next. The map has no edges because he has not yet decided where the world ends. This single object dismantles the story that has followed Genghis Khan through 8 centuries of historical record, the story of a man of pure instinct, of animal force, of destruction without architecture. The felt map is evidence of something more unsettling than violence. It is evidence of sustained, methodical cartographic ambition. A man who did not conquer reactively, but planned continuously, who kept the unfinished edges of the world on the floor of his sleeping quarters so that the last thing he saw before he closed his eyes and the first thing he saw when he opened them was everything that was not yet done. He didn't conquer the world by accident. He planned it on a piece of felt, in a room no one was allowed to enter. Here is the one uncertainty this reconstruction must speak aloud, because credibility demands it. We do not know if this specific map survived. The felt objects of the Mongolian court were almost entirely lost in the political chaos that followed his death, destroyed, dispersed, or deliberately erased by successors who needed to own the future more than they needed to preserve the past. What we know with confidence is this: felt cartography existed in the Mongolian tradition. The Khan received campaign intelligence in tactile, physical form. The private quarters of the Ordu were documented as working spaces, not resting spaces, rooms where decisions were made, not merely where the body recovered from them. The map, as an object, may be gone. What it represents, the habit of mind, the refusal to consider the work finished, the western edge always open, that is documented in every campaign decision he made in the final decade of his life. The object may not have survived. The man it describes absolutely did. He dies in 1227. The
The cause is not recorded with certainty. A fall from a horse during the Shah campaign, some sources say. Illness, the Mongolian winter entered him somewhere he could not defend. A wound he did not report because he had spent 60 years refusing to be reduced by physical damage. We do not know. He asked to be buried without a marker. No tomb, no monument, no coordinates given to anyone who would survive the burial. The location of his body is the most successfully kept secret in the history of human civilization. 800 years of searching by some of the world's most determined archaeologists, and the steppe has given nothing back. The burial party kills every witness they pass on the route. Not cruelty this time, concealment. When it is done, horses are driven across the ground until the surface shows nothing. Trees are planted. The land is asked to forget, and the land agrees. The felt map disappears. The on-god figures disappear. The worn leather bridle, gone. The boy's bow from the corner of the sleeping platform, gone. The ordu is struck in the weeks that follow. Hundreds of structures reduced to inventory, distributed among successors, loaded onto carts, and pulled in 4 directions by 4 sons who have already begun to disagree about what their father meant. His sons divide the world between them. None of them keep it whole. His grandson, Kublai Khan, builds the largest version of the empire, extending it further than even the felt map projected. And then it stops. The western edge is never finished. The colorless stones are never classified. His successors build palaces, stone ones, permanent ones, fixed to the ground with foundations that announce, "We are not leaving." They face forward, not south. The felt walls come down and do not go back up. The spatial language of the Tor, the fire, the on-god, the threshold, the compass orientation of everything becomes tradition rather than governance, observed rather than inhabited. The constitutional architecture of a room that no longer exists is replaced by thrones on platforms and courts with marble floors and emperors who need large beds. The empire that began on the steppe ends in buildings. But one thing does not disappear. The secret history of the Mongols, the only account written in Mongolian by Mongolians within living memory of the man, is hidden after his death. Not destroyed, hidden. Too dangerous for foreign courts to read, too important for Mongolian memory to lose. It is buried in an archive, sealed, protected, and deliberately forgotten by the people who hid it until the hiding was no longer necessary. It does not surface for 6 centuries. When it finally does, it still contains his words, imperfectly recorded, politically edited by hands that came after, translated through layers of language and time and agenda, but present. A voice from the most private room in the medieval world, still speaking across 800 years to anyone willing to sit down and listen. The book that would not die. The one defiance that outlasted the empire, the dynasty, the stone palaces, the successors, the historians who tried to contain him, and the steppe that swallowed his grave. Quiet respect settles like snow, slowly, completely, without announcement. The search for his tomb is one of the most active ongoing projects in the archaeology of the ancient world. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, decades of Mongolian and international scholarship converging on a landscape that has kept its secret longer than most civilizations have existed. The Mongolian government has placed restrictions near excavation near Burkhan Khaldun, the sacred mountain of his birth, his refuge in crisis, and almost certainly his burial region. It is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The restrictions are not bureaucratic delay. They are a living culture's active decision that some things are more important than discovery, that a man who asked to be left alone in death deserves, at a minimum, the attempt to honor that. The secret history has been fully translated into 17 languages. Mongolian ethnographers have reconstructed the spatial layout of the traditional Urdu. The felt cartography tradition has been documented and partially rebuilt. The architectural language of the Tor, the fire, the Angad, the threshold, the compass orientation of everything is still spoken today in Mongolia, still lived in, still inhabited by people who did not need a reconstruction to understand what the room means. The reconstruction you have walked through today is built from the best current scholarship available, but it is not finished. It cannot be finished. New fieldwork near the Caroline River Basin produces new data every decade. New readings of the secret history produce new interpretations. New voices enter the conversation. The edges of the felt map, in other words, are still being extended. History is not a closed room. It is a
You stop, not because someone told you to, because every instinct you have tells you that the next step forward is the last one you will ever take. The air here is different, warmer than the world outside, and the world outside is trying to kill you with cold. The Mongolian winter does not negotiate, but in here, something is burning low and steady, and the warmth feels less like comfort and more like permission. Like the room decided to let you live. You can smell horse, not the sharp smell of a stable, something older than that. Cured leather worked by decades of bare hands. Smoke from a fuel you don't recognize, dry and faintly sweet. And underneath it all, something animal and close, the smell of a life lived entirely outdoors that has simply been folded inside for the night. You cannot hear the army. That is the thing that undoes you first. Outside these walls, 10,000 horses and the largest military force the medieval world has ever assembled are breathing and shifting in the dark. You felt the ground trembling with them 200 yards back, but the walls, thick, layered felt over a lattice of willow wood, absorb all of it. In here, the only sound is the fire, and the fire barely speaks above a whisper. The floor beneath your boots is not what you expected. Carpet, Mongolian wool beneath, Chinese silk on top, the kind of silk that takes a year to produce and was stripped from a court that no longer has courts. It is soft in a way that feels wrong for this man, a man who has not slept under a permanent roof in 40 years. There is an object in the corner of this room that no Chinese emperor, no caliph, no Byzantine lord ever knew existed, and it explains everything about why this man could not be stopped. He is 58 years old. He has perhaps 2 years left, and for the first time in 40 decades, he is sitting still. Burkhan Haldun foothills, central Mongolia, 1225 AD. What you are about to walk through is a reconstruction built from 4 sources that rarely appear in the same room together. The first is the secret history of the Mongols, written in 1240 AD, just 13 years after his death. It is the only account composed by Mongolian voices within living memory of the man himself, and it contains domestic and personal details that Chinese court records deliberately erased. The second is the fieldwork coming out of the joint Mongolian-Japanese Egiin Gol archaeological surveys and the ongoing UNESCO-partnered excavations near the Caroline River Basin. Physical evidence of how the Urdu, the great moving palace complex, was actually arranged in space. The third is the Persian chronicle of Ata Malik Juvayni, a man who entered Mongol court spaces within 2 decades of Genghis Khan's reign and wrote down what he saw with the precision of someone who understood he was watching history while it was still warm. And the fourth is 8 centuries of Mongolian ethnographic record, because the ger, the traditional felt tent, has not changed in any structurally meaningful way since the 12th century. The spatial language of this room is still spoken today. This is not speculation. This is architecture, archaeology, and testimony assembled into a single hour.
If you want to keep walking through history's most forbidden rooms, subscribe right now and hit the bell. These reconstructions go deeper every single week, and this one is just getting started. And before we go any further, drop a comment. If you could step inside the private quarters of any ruler in history, anywhere in the world, whose door would you open? I read every one. Now, step through the entrance. The guards have looked away. You have exactly 1 hour. The first thing you need to understand is that there is no palace. Not in any sense the word carries for you. No stone, no fixed address, no gate you could find again if you lost your way. The structure you're approaching has been assembled and disassembled hundreds of times in the last 40 decades. It will be assembled and disassembled again before the month is out. The empire moves, and the seat of the empire moves with it. What the Persian ambassadors saw from a distance and recorded with confusion they could not quite disguise was something they described as a city of white clouds sitting on the horizon. Dozens of felt structures arranged in concentric rings across the steppe, fires burning at measured intervals, the organization so precise that it read as permanent, even though none of it was anchored to the ground. That precision was not aesthetic, it was political. The outer ring houses the soldiers and the supply lines. The middle ring holds the yarguchi, the imperial judges, and the jarchi, the official heralds whose sole function is to ensure that not a single unauthorized sound, not a single unvetted voice reaches the interior. You have already passed through both rings to be here. That either means you are very trusted or very dangerous. Tonight, perhaps both. The central ger is larger than the others, but not extravagantly so. This is the reframe that catches every foreign visitor off guard. They arrive expecting Versailles. They find something closer to intention. The door faces south. This is not a design choice. South, in Mongolian cosmological architecture, is the direction of warmth, of the living fire, of the world that sustains rather than kills. Every ger door in the Mongolian tradition faces south. The Khan's faces south because he has never stopped being Mongolian, not through the conquest of China, not through the destruction of the Khwarezmian Empire, not through campaigns that stretched from the Pacific coast to the edges of Eastern Europe. He has taken everything the world had to offer and brought it inside a structure that has not changed since his grandmother's grandmother was born. And the threshold, do not step on it. The wooden frame at the base of the entrance is the home's spine in Mongolian belief, older than any living tradition. Stepping on it does not mark you as rude, it marks you as someone who does not understand what a home is. Among the diplomatic incidents recorded in Giovanni's chronicles, threshold violations appear more than once. The Khan noticed every time. You step over, and the world outside disappears. The room orients you before you have time to choose a direction. To your left, west, is the men's side, weapons rack, a short bow and a campaign bow, both strung and ready. Riding gear hung with the casual precision of equipment used daily, not displayed. A row of vessels along the base of the wall, birch bark sealed with felt stoppers, airag, fermented mare's milk, the drink of the steppe that has fueled this army across a continent. To your right, east, is the women's side, milk pails, food stores organized with the seriousness of military logistics, because in moving empires, they are military logistics. The domestic instruments of a civilization that understands survival as a form of strategy. This division is not courtesy, it is cosmological architecture, as fixed and non-negotiable as the direction of the door. The room is a map of a worldview in which every object has a correct position, and correct position is the difference between order and chaos. At the northern point, the tor is the seat. Low to the ground, a wooden frame draped in white felt, worn at the armrests to a color closer to ivory. It faces south, which means everyone who enters must cross the full length of the interior to reach it. There is no short path. The room has been designed so that the act of approach is itself an act of submission, and it costs the Khan nothing because the architecture does it for him. On the western rack, among the campaign bows and the sword belts and the military inventory of a world conqueror, there is a bridle. Worn leather, visibly repaired at the cheekpiece with cord that does not match the original. The repair is old, but not recent. This bridle has been fixed and fixed again over many years. It is his own, not ceremonial, not a symbol. He still rides. At 58 years old, in the Mongolian winter, after 40 years of continuous campaign, he still rides his own horse with his own repaired bridle. You do not expect the man who remade the world to have mended his own tack, but perhaps that is exactly the point. The fire has not gone cold in 40 years. Not metaphorically, literally. A dedicated attendant, a genuinely imperial significance, not a servant's role, tends this hearth through every night, in every location, in every season. When the ordu moves, the fire moves with it, carried forward in an ember pot, the living flame transferred to a new hearth before the old one dies. It is the same fire. It has always been the same fire. The tonneau above draws the smoke upward in a column that functions simultaneously as a chimney, a calendar, and a compass. The angle of light through the opening marks the hours of the day, and the position of the stars through it at night has guided navigation across terrain with no landmarks for 1,000 miles. But the fire is more than engineering. It is the home's living presence. The Mongolian tradition that governs this hearth predates Genghis Khan by centuries and will outlast his empire by many more. Guests do not throw bones into it. They do not pour liquid over